Hi, my name is Jerry Cabasudo, and today I'll be talking about taking responsibility for love, applying natural law to love and relationships. Thank you to the organizers of the Freedom Under Natural Law Conference for inviting me today, especially Leslie Powers, Will Keller, Derek Barlicelli, and Chris Jansen. Thank you so much. So, a second failed marriage, 8+ months of arguing for child custody, one tower moment. This was my reality last year, a year where I was immersed in my traumatized victim. How could they do this to my children and I? Vengeful warrior, if my children and I suffer, then they should suffer. And martyr, I will fight the system and bleed by example. This endless Karpman triangle loop led me back to where I began, with myself. By hitting rock bottom, I was forced to look at myself in the mirror and truly ask where I went wrong and how I can improve in my thoughts, emotions, and actions. Through developing an integral approach between natural law, transcendental meditation teachings, modern psychology, and ancient Western and Eastern philosophy in the trivium, I found out how to take responsibility for my love life. But let's go through the grammar of how I started this journey. Firstly, what is love? For this, I examined how ancient Greek philosophers defined it. The most obvious kind of love is eros, a passionate, romantic, or sexual love. Then we have philia, an affectionate regard, friendship, or brotherly love. This is the deep bond between equals, friends, comrades, or community members, built on loyalty, shared values, virtue, and mutual respect. The term platonic love, or non-sexual affection, stems from Plato's emphasis on this as a higher form. We also have storge, familial love or natural affection. One type of love not highlighted often enough is philautia, or self-love. Aristotle viewed this as the foundation for other loves. A healthy self-compassion and care for oneself enables better love towards others. It has positive self-esteem, self-care, and negative narcissistic, self-obsessed aspects which obviously require balance and discretion. And finally, the one I choose to live by, agape, defined by Mark Passio as the love of truth. Agape is when you, quote, deeply care for the truth and you want to learn all of the requirements for what it's going to take to make humanity free. Episodes 235 to 236 of whatonearthishappening.com. Though I had thought I had understood each of these, in my recent experiences, I realized the one I struggled with the most was philautia. I had allowed myself, and therefore also my children, to be harmed for far too long in an abusive home environment. Because I hadn't set boundaries earlier, we had to pay for these accrued consequences later. That was my karma to bear for the lack of care I gave to myself and therefore my own children. So, if we look at the Hermetic principle of mentalism, that the all is mind, I ask myself how I can change my own thinking. Instead of thinking of myself as a traumatized victim, vengeful warrior, or self depleting martyr, I could start by not personalizing what was happening to me and my kids. The parties involved in my divorce and child custody case were part of a system working exactly as designed. Catherine Austin Fitts' work reveals that the legal and financial systems are designed to strip assets from the middle class and transfer them to the central banking and corporate elite, otherwise known as the financial coup d'etat. This is accomplished through what she coins as the harvesting model. The current economic system isn't capitalism, but rather a harvesting operation. Systems are engineered to liquidate the wealth of the middle class and move it upward. The family court is one mechanism for wealth transfer. Divorce proceedings often force the liquidation of family assets, homes, savings, businesses to pay legal fees, experts, and court costs, effectively transferring generational wealth from the family unit to the legal industrial complex. Fitts also describes the destruction of the family unit as part of this wealth transfer operation. The nuclear family is the primary unit of economic independence and resistance against state or corporate control. By breaking up the family, facilitated by an adversarial family law system, individuals become more vulnerable and dependent on the state and/or in massive debt. High conflict divorces destroy the financial stability required uh, to maintain middle class status. The legal process itself is the punishment, designed to bankrupt the targets regardless of guilt or innocence. Extending this logic to family court, the process is viewed as a way to ensure both parties emerge poorer, with the system, lawyers, courts, state agencies absorbing the difference. Once I saw that the attorneys and judges were acting exactly as they should, with no regard for actual truth or justice, when I realized my ex husband was going to continue to treat me and the kids poorly, just as he had in the past, I stopped personalizing everything. They would have done all they would have done to whoever committed the justified self defense reactions. Which brought me back to my teen years when I read the parable of the empty boat by Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi in his ancient text Zhuangzi around 4th century BCE. A monk decides to meditate in solitude, so he rows a small boat to the middle of a calm lake, anchors it, closes his eyes, and to begin his practice. After some time in peaceful stillness, he suddenly feels a jolt, the shock of another boat colliding with his own. His eyes snap open, and anger surges through him. He turns, ready to shout at the careless fool who interrupted his meditation. But when he looks, the other boat is empty, just drifting on the current. There's no one to blame. His anger vanishes instantly, replaced by calm acceptance. He realizes that the collision was simply the result of wind and water, without intent or malice. An even more concise version from Zhuangzi himself. If a man is crossing a river and an empty boat collides with his own skiff, even though he be a bad-tempered man, he will not become very angry. But if he sees a man in the boat, he will shout at him to steer clear. If the shout is not heard, he will shout again and yet again and begin cursing, and all because there is somebody in the boat. Yet if the boat were empty, he would not be shouting and not be angry. The story we are told are the stories we tell ourselves. Being aware that I was programmed by the family law system to personalize what had happened to my children and I, and blame others for running their programs they were programmed with, the only way out, I realized, was within. By not taking things personally, I could avoid projection of my Karpman triangle mentality. There is a balance that can be found between setting boundaries, uh, continuing to fight for the children's best interests, otherwise known as divine masculine self defense, without personalization. In his landmark book, The Four Agreements, A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom by Don Miguel Ruiz, he writes of not taking things personally. Nothing others do or say is truly about you. It's a projection of their own reality, dreams, or inner struggles. By not internalizing others' opinions or actions, you can free yourself from unnecessary suffering and ego driven reactions. Ruiz emphasizes emotional detachment without apathy. Ruiz explains that people live in their own personal dream, a subjective reality shaped by experiences, beliefs, and traumas. So their words or behaviors reflect their inner world, not an objective truth about you. If someone criticizes you harshly, it's often rooted in their insecurities, pain, or programming, not your inherent worth. Taking it personally creates a poison of resentment or self doubt, trapping you in victimhood. Instead, respond with compassion or neutrality, recognizing it's not about me. Ruiz uses metaphors like arrows. Others may shoot them, but you choose whether to let them pierce you. This leads to greater freedom, as you're no longer controlled by external validation or rejection. The empty boat parable directly mirrors this. Anger arises from assuming personal intent, malice in a collision, but seeing the boat or person as empty of targeted harm dissolves the reaction. Seeing others' reactions as their unhealed child self, to borrow from the internal family systems framework, or shadow, Jung, this echoes attachment styles, for example, anxious types over personalizing rejection, which I will outline more below, and Mark Passio's natural law. Violations stem from ignorance rather than personal vendettas. By applying this, one can break cycles of self loathing, as in developing philautia or positive self love versus narcissism, and stop internalizing societal slavery as one's fault. Another source of information I gathered in the grammar stage of my trivium process was that of different attachment styles. Attachment styles are patterns of how we form emotional bonds and interact in close relationships, particularly romantic ones, but they also influence friendships, family dynamics, and even professional connections. The concept comes from attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby in the 1950s and expanded by Mary Ainsworth in the 1970s through her famous strange situation experiments with infants. These early caregiver interactions create internal working models of relationships that often carry into adulthood, shaping expectations of intimacy, trust, and independence. There are different types of attachment styles. The first is secure attachment, the healthiest and most common style, around 50 to 60% of adults. People with secure attachment feel comfortable with intimacy and independence. They trust others, communicate needs openly, handle conflict constructively, and view themselves and partners positively. They expect relationships to be supportive and reliable. In relationships, securely attached people are balanced, resilient during stress, good at emotional regulation, and able to seek or receive support without fear. This stems from childhood roots of consistent, responsive caregiving that are built on trust and safety. The next type is anxious or anxious preoccupied or anxious ambivalent. Attachment This attachment style features high anxiety and low avoidance. Individuals often worry about their partner's love and availability, fear abandonment, and seek constant reassurance. They can become clingy, jealous, or overly emotional and may overanalyze interactions. In relationships, they have an intense desire for closeness, but heightened sensitivity to perceived rejection or distance, drama, or protest behaviors when feeling insecure. Childhood roots include inconsistent caregiving, sometimes attentive and sometimes neglectful, leading to uncertainty about reliability. This was clearly my attachment style, programmed in me from childhood. The avoidant or dismissive avoidant attachment features low anxiety and high avoidance. These folks prioritize independence, self reliance, and emotional distance. They downplay the importance of relationships, suppress feelings, and avoid vulnerability or deep intimacy to protect themselves. In relationships, they may seem aloof, emotionally unavailable, or uncomfortable with closeness. They value autonomy over connection and can pull away when things get too intimate. Childhood roots include caregivers who were rejecting, dismissive of emotions, or encouraged premature independence. This was the attachment style of most of my exes, and I attached to them to relive the traumas of my own childhood while they relived theirs. Disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment features high anxiety and high avoidance. This is the most complex or insecure style. People desire closeness but fear it intensely, often due to unresolved trauma or frightening or abusive caregiving. This leads to unpredictable behavior, pushing away then pulling back, confusion in relationships, or difficulty trusting. In relationships, they display chaotic patterns, fear of both abandonment and engulfment, emotional volatility, and challenges with consistency or safety. Childhood roots are abusive, frightening, or highly unpredictable in caregiving, creating a conflict between seeking comfort and fearing the source of it. I've seen this attachment style in some of my former relationships, and it was like living with Jekyll and Hyde all the time. I was part of my own problem. Anxious attachment programs had been written into my mind from childhood wounds I had subconsciously been operating. I had been picking romantic partners that were operating under their subconscious unhealed programs. And my ex and I allowed these programs to affect our children in our child custody case. Though my self defensive reactions were justified, I realized I could free myself from the prison I allowed my children and I to live in by not personalizing any of it and continuing the fight without fear or Karpman triangle looping. Once I had gathered the grammar and processed and understood I was part of the problem, I then began researching solutions, which I will discuss further next. Suffice it to say for now that when I was able to change my thinking, the traumatized reactive emotions subsided due to a variety of healing modalities, which included transcendental meditation, and clarity began to emerge for right action. To begin discussing solutions to cultivate self love or philautia, the basis for all types of love, including agape, we need we have to rework the Cartman drama triangle we began with at the start of this essay. David Emerald in the early 2000s created a framework of healing he dubs the empowerment dynamic, which transforms the victim in the Cartman drama triangle into that of the creator. The creator focuses on desired outcomes rather than problems, asking, "What do I want? And what can I do next?" Creators take responsibility for their choices, seeing themselves as capable of designing responses and using challenges as fuel for growth instead of evidence of helplessness. We also need to transform the vengeful warrior or persecutor in the old model into that of the challenger. In Emerald's framework, the challenger still tells the truth and confronts reality, but does so to provoke learning and development rather than to blame or control. She or he holds people to higher standards and asks, "Given this situation, what can we learn here?" and invites others to step up rather than shrink. Finally, rather than playing the martyr or rescuer, people can choose the role of the coach. Coaches offer support through questions, curiosity, and deep listening, helping others discover their own solutions instead of fixing them for them. Coaches respect other person's resourcefulness, encourages experimentation, and avoids creating dependency or burnout. The only way out was within. I had to rework the drama triangle I had been socialized and programmed into by the legal industrial complex and through insecure attachment styles of my childhood and cultivate the self responsibility necessary to generate philautia. The idea of care had always been shared with everyone but myself. By handling my own oxygen mask first, I can be more abundant with the agape level care I have devoted my life to. You've probably heard of the phrase "know thyself." It is an ancient aphorism that originated in Greece, inscribed at the entrance of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, a sacred site known for its oracle and philosophical wisdom. It's not definitively attributed to a single individual. However, it's most famously associated with the philosopher Socrates, who referenced and embodied it in his teachings, as recorded by his student Plato. It echoes the Hermetic principle of mentalism, all is mind. Through changing one's own mindset, one can affect change in the world through the alignment of our thoughts, emotions, and actions. I realized that the only way I was going to change my love life and child custody situation was by first changing my own mindset. Now that I was aware of the Cartman drama triangle I was in, incorporating the empowerment dynamic as a shift in mindset, I also began researching the internal family systems framework of Richard Schwartz. In this modern framework, the shadows of Jung are reframed as parts. These shadows or parts aren't meant to be just confronted, but integrated. Our inner parts interact with each other like members of a family. My inner mother or manager was trying to prevent pain and keep life under control. Perfectionism, people pleasing, overworking, harsh inner critic, and hypervigilance. My inner father or firefighter was reacting when pain broke through, using urgent strategies to numb or distract. Rage, dissociation, compulsive sex, etc. My inner child or exile was the young, wounded parts that carried shame, trauma, grief, fear, or loneliness. They were exiled from my awareness because their pain felt overwhelming. People often talk about killing one's ego, but if one were to do that in the IFS model, one would be killing one's own inner child, the exile who is hurt and requires nurturing. The point isn't to eliminate pain, but to parent it. I realized I had to heal my inner child with my inner parents. The Divine Mother is within all of us. She is nurturing, loving, and a place of rest and surrender, and a place of interconnection and introspection. The Divine Father in us is protecting, reassuring, and encouraging to take right action and is part of an externalization process. You need both to manifest or create. To work with the divine connection within oneself is to take right actions in the world. Which brings me to transcendental meditation. I encourage you all who have not yet been trained to find an independent transcendental meditation teacher in your area so that you can experience it yourself. Though it is grounded in Vedic traditions, it is the only spiritual practice that I have become aware of that invites practitioners to directly experience with Source, a connection we all have within us. I can't meditate because I have too many negative thoughts, or I can't meditate because I get too distracted and can't sit still. If any of these are parts in your psyche, you may, of all people, probably benefit the most from meditation. I'm not saying meditating is the only way, it's just a way I have experienced that has worked for me and would recommend. By cycling through an inner mantra, as a practitioner, you can fall past the point of sleep. The mantra keeps you in a state of awareness, and you develop not only a sense of inner peace, but also a sort of divine indifference or depersonalization, as alluded to in the empty boat story and with Ruiz's work, with all that occurs in life. You begin to see how connected we all truly are, not just to each other as humans, but to everything in existence. You develop a sense of unity consciousness that transcends one's individual illusion of separation from the whole. What does this have to do with love? By depersonalizing, we can start to see the other, your and their patterns, where we all are in our healing journey and not involve ourselves in their or our drama triangle. Emotionally focused therapy, EFT, not to be confused with emotional freedom technique, which uses the same acronym and is also helpful for individual trauma healing, by Sue Johnson offers an answer to different attachment style combinations or the demon dialogues, aka negative cycles. 70 to 75% of couples move from distress to recovery, and 90% show improvement. The first stage is of de escalation or stabilization. The goal is to stop the bleeding. The therapist helps the couple see that the cycle is the enemy, not the partner, aka depersonalization. The couple learns to identify their dance. Here we are doing that thing again where I get scared and poke you and you get overwhelmed and run away. Conflict becomes less dangerous because the couple understands what's happening. Stage two is restructuring or bonding. This is the heart of EFT. The therapist helps partners express their deep fears or vulnerability rather than their secondary reactive emotions, i.e., anger or frustration. The withdrawing partner learns to stay present and express their fear of failing the other. The pursuing partner learns to ask for their needs from a place of vulnerability. I feel lonely rather than a place of anger. You're never home. This results in a new emotional experience where safety is created. The last stage is consolidation. Once the bond is secure, the couple uses this new safety to solve old pragmatic problems. Issues that seemed impossible to solve, money, in laws, sex, are often resolved quickly because the emotional threat is gone. Obviously, both parties need to be open to this type of healing. In my love journey, though emotionally focused therapy did not result in healing for the relationships I have been in where I used it, I was still able to see the attachment style patterns within myself for all my relationships, not just my romantic ones. But before I zoom out on how to apply an integral approach to my natural law based activism when it comes to love, I also want to mention the healing methodologies of the Gottmans. John and Julie Gottman are renowned psychologists and relationship researchers who have studied thousands of couples for over 40 years through their Seattle Love Lab and longitudinal studies. Their work encompasses on core concepts on love and marriage. The first is that of the magic ratio, a 5-to-1 positive to negative interactions. In happy, stable relationships, couples maintain at least 5 positive interactions, like affection, humor, appreciation, empathy, or support, for every 1 negative interaction during everyday life and especially during conflict. This magic ratio buffers against negativity and helps sustain love and connection. Couples who fall below this, uh, I for example, closer to 1 or worse, are more likely to deteriorate over time. The Gottmans have also identified the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. These are the most destructive communication patterns that erode love and predict divorce if unchecked, especially contempt, the strongest predictor. Criticism is when you are attacking your partner's character or personality instead of a specific behavior. You always or never, you're so selfish, versus a gentle complaint like, I feel hurt when. It feels like a personal assault and escalates negativity. When we change into I statements instead, when I see you do X, I feel Y, it's a method where the message can be heard better by the other party involved. Contempt is the second horseman, showing disdain through sarcasm, mockery, eye rolling, name calling, or superiority. Oh, great job, genius. Way to screw up again. This is toxic and weakens immune systems per research and is the number one predictor of divorce. The third horseman is defensiveness, counterattacking, making excuses, or playing the victim instead of taking responsibility, e.g., it's not my fault, you're the one who. It blocks accountability and fuels escalation. Stonewalling is the final horseman, withdrawing emotionally or physically, shutting down, tuning out, or going silent, often due to feeling overwhelmed or flooded. It prevents resolution and signals emotional shutdown. Replacing these horsemen with healthier antidotes, gentle startups, appreciation, accepting responsibility, self soothing, is central to their approach. In the sound relationship house theory, their foundational model, the Gottmans visualize a strong marriage as a house with levels built on trust and commitment, the weight bearing walls. The foundation is building love maps, deeply knowing your partner's inner world, dreams, stresses, likes, dislikes, and history. They also recommend sharing fondness and admiration by expressing appreciation and respect regularly. Turning toward instead of away means responding positively to your partner's bids for connection. Small requests for attention like, "How was your day?" They also recommend having a positive perspective, approaching problems with optimism and goodwill. Managing conflict means handling solvable problems practically and understanding perpetual ones. 69% of issues are unsolvable due to personality differences. Focus on dialogue, not resolution. They also recommend making life dreams come true by supporting each other's aspirations. By co creating shared meaning, a couple can build a sense of purpose, rituals, values, and culture. Trust and commitment hold the relationship house together, creating emotional safety and lasting love. So, given all of the above research or grammar, how can we logically integrate these tools for the rhetoric stage of our trivium process? How can we apply what we learn in our romantic or familial relationships to a societal agape level? I first recommend promoting empathy education. By teaching others, especially the next generations, empathetic perspective taking through homeschooling or unschooling. This reduces prejudice and builds secure societal attachments. We should also encourage public activation by volunteering, mentoring others, or donating to causes promoting empathy. By focusing on the mental health strategies people can use on themselves, we can address systemic barriers to love. When engaging with others, we can combat division with dialogue. By using social media mindfully, we can respond to differing views with curiosity or Socratic questioning. Help me understand your perspective. Or, what would happen if this were to happen? Instead of contempt. Movements like restorative justice apply Gottman principles to societal conflicts. Finally, we should network globally by traveling, learning other languages, and or engaging in cultural exchanges to expand philautia or healthy self-love into universal respect. By supporting orgs or actions based in natural law and agape, we can parent ourselves and therefore future generations. I would also like to leave you with one of my favorite parables borrowed from Eastern philosophy, the parable of the tiger and the strawberry. A man was walking through the wilderness when he encountered a fierce tiger. Terrified, he fled, and the tiger in hot pursuit. With the tiger in hot pursuit. He came to the edge of a steep cliff and, with no other escape, grabbed hold of a wild vine root growing there and swinging himself over the precipice to dangle precariously. Looking up, he saw the tiger snarling at him from above, ready to pounce if he climbed back. Looking down, he saw another tiger at the bottom of the cliff, waiting hungrily for him to fall. As if that weren't enough, two mice, one black and one white, appeared and began gnawing at the vine that held him. In that moment of despair, the man noticed a single ripe strawberry growing from a clump of grass on the cliffside just within reach. He plucked it, popped it into his mouth, and savored its sweetness. "How delicious!" he exclaimed. This tale resonated with me because it was a reminder that I have a choice when it comes to how I perceive problems. To see myself as trapped was my own perception. Perception and reality are not always the same. To view the divorce and child custody situation I was in as a trap was the obvious choice. By changing my perspective, to know myself, and to see that I had a choice in how I perceived my situation, no matter how seemingly futile, an answer appeared. By focusing on the present moment, by finding pockets of joy in the seemingly hopeless situation I was in, by creating positive bonding experiences for me and my children every time we have our supervised visits, I've managed to effect change in my case. By finding present moment awareness and even finding joy as a form of resistance, I've had to first know, and I had agency over how I perceive my reality. I once told this same tiger strawberry story to my older son. He then asked me, "Why can't the man just feed strawberries to the mice and tigers and climb up and run away?" I smiled and hugged him. My own child was able to help me see that there was always another answer I haven't yet seen. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, the next generations may come with the narrative rewrite that changes humanity's trajectory. Thank you.